Well, next I want to introduce another great modeler, Steve Sherrill. And Steve started a great new segment on our show saying it's about what do you want to talk about? So Steve, what do you want to talk about?
Well, tonight we're going to talk about going to train shows.
Got it.
We're coming up in that season now where we're going to get more and more train shows are going to be available to go to and attend. I know myself, during my modeling time before the train shows, I have a want list. And I usually jot down what I want on an index card and then, of course, leave it at home. But no, I take it with me. So I have a shopping list, just like you would go to any store. And when I get to the train shows, I start looking for these items. Mainly, I look for things that I can't get at the local hobby shop, or that maybe somebody is selling off a supply of parts. And so I'm looking for certain items. And I didn't know if you know, what the fellow modelers who are on this site, what they do when they go to train shows. Are they just going to look at the new products, going because they have nothing to do on that Saturday? Are they going to see friends? Going to see the layouts that are there to get ideas? Or are they doing all these things? So I thought maybe tonight we could maybe talk about some of the things that we're looking for and that we do when we go to train shows. And also, how do you select which train show you're going to attend? Are you going to go to one that you had good results last year? Or are you going to go to a big one, which maybe has 800-900 tables? You know, just why are you going to this particular train show? Last year, I actually found a couple of train shows that I had never been to, and I was really surprised at what they had there, the items, and the prices were very reasonable for what I saw for sale, and I picked up some things that I probably wouldn't have picked up at any other time, but they were just some items that, you know, maybe I wanted to get, but they weren't at the top of my list. So you know, I'd like to hear from some of the guys on here and what they are looking for when they go to train shows. And again, how you select which ones you go to. So if anybody has some input, I would certainly appreciate some ideas that you have.
I go to train shows to meet all you guys in person. I mean, it's the interaction with everybody is just another dimension of the hobby that just makes it so interesting to me. So it's great to see
I know,
online.
I know. Yeah, when we go with ON30, it's a more of a friendship type of thing. We're going to see the guys maybe we haven't seen in a year or 2 years, and just share ideas with them. And that's one of the wonderful things about knowing these fellow modelers for a long time, is being able to share ideas, and that's a good way to get together. But other people go and they look for items like windows, for instance. You know, you had a special window in your model there. I guess, if I don't know, was it Grant or Titchy? What?
Last time I was at Al Judy's show, I bought a bag full of windows from Macomber, you know, so I go to buy supplies sometimes too, you know, just to support the vendors.
Yeah. Well, now we're going to be able to get those 3D printed, you know.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to find.
I'll say one more thing though.
That kind of
everybody else, but I went to an NMRA national show, and I saw, you guys probably know Tony Keister. You know, he's fairly famous model railroader with Model Railroading magazine. And I saw his name tag, and I'd never met him before, and I walked up, introduced myself. he was very standoffish. You know, I just thought that was kind of weird, which at our ON30 shows, you know, everybody's a little more relaxed, you know what I mean? I don't mean to say that this is true of every modeler out there, but one thing I can say for sure, the ON30 shows are a lot more casual, you know. Anyway, and I'll be quiet now. I've talked enough tonight.
Yeah, I see we have some people here who live in Canada. What are the train shows like in Canada? If you guys could, you know, give us some input on, you know, how often are they? Are they once a year, twice a year, local? Do you have to travel? I don't know if anybody from Canada on here wants to say anything.
Larry McDonald here in Toronto. It's much like down in the States. It's not the largest shows that you have down there, like the NMRA National, the Narrow Gauge National. But you know me from being down at Kimberton. We used to love coming down there. Now, narrow gauge wise, we don't have like the ON3 show that Al Judy's putting on and the one that used to be down at Kimberton. But there is one, and it's growing, and I think it's being held in Hamilton, which is not that far. That's about maybe 40 minutes from the border. And so we get the Americans coming across for that too. It's hard for us to draw, like a lot of the manufacturers and brass importers are in the States. And for them to come to shows and bring their displays, they have a lot of hassle with paperwork, bringing their stuff across the border. And so that has always been held us down from having a lot of people from the United States come over and participate as dealers or things like that. But we have lots of shows. The NMRA has their little bulletins and that, and there'd be a page showing all the shows coming up. And it's to the point now where you have to choose on a particular Saturday which show you want to go to because they just overlap. So there is a lot. Of course, in Canada, most of the population is all along the southern border, from one end of the country to the other, bordering right on the States. Then we have so much vast land up north. So most of all this is down here where all the major cities are located along the border. And but there's a lot of activity, a lot of shows, big and small. And we are getting this one narrow gauge show. It's been going for quite a while, but it's really kind of like when Al Judy first started his shows. And it was like your ON30 fraternities there in the shows you have. So it was a bunch of fellows that were like friends and showing up all the time. But it is starting to get some exposure. It's in a good place right now, and it's in an interesting building. It's in a steam museum. It's a big pump house. It's a huge walking beam pump that supplied the water for Hamilton, Ontario, which is one of our cities on Lake Ontario. And it had to pump it up to the tanks up on top of the hill. So this is going back to the mid 1800s, this big steam pump, walking beam steam pump. And then there's other buildings, and they're historical buildings, and they have a lot of other machinery and whatnot, and they're of interest to people like us. And so the show is being held in that location now, and I think it's just excellent. So I know there's other Canadians on here. I'll let them speak.
Pat here.
Do you guys get a lot of international models coming from England and places like that?
No.
We
don't get here.
Here in our, yes, we call it the GTA. You have Toronto and then the Greater Toronto region, they call it. So that takes in cities like Burlington, Hamilton, Oshawa, and things like that. And in Burlington, there is a large contingent of English modelers, and they put on shows, but it's about every 2 years. But their modeling is excellent. And you get to see different products from the UK, especially before a computer. So going back, 20, 25 years ago, you'd go there and you'd see stuff that was so different, even in the materials that they used. I think they were ahead of us for scenery materials, tree making, grass, hedges, all that kind of thing, because a lot of their work is very manicured. The roadsides, the little stone bridges and all that type of thing. But there is a fraternity of English modelers. And now it's in our narrow gauge little group, which you know, Steve, a bunch of us that used to come down. There's another fellow
Yeah.
now, and he's collecting like models, handmade models from around the world. And a lot of them are, English quarry models, steam engines and things like that. And he's opened our eyes to a whole new genre of modeling out there, and with the computer now, and even new tracks. You had some people on from Australia and places like that. They show us what's happening down there. And so, yeah, it's.
I think we must mention the fact that we haven't had a national in this area for quite some time now. Been a number
That's
of
true.
years.
To my recollection, I think that I've only known of two national NMRAs here in Toronto. One over
Yeah, it's
10
been
years
quite a
ago,
while.
and the other one was back in the 50s at
Yeah.
the Royal York Hotel.
I think they're looking for a host site.
Indeed,
It
they
might be,
are.
but we're not ready.
I think that's kind of the challenge. I mean, that's, and I think the thing that's interesting is that, density gives you larger train shows. So
Yes.
out here on the West Coast, I mean, there's really a dearth of better train shows out here comparatively. It's dramatically less. So
See, I think frankly, there's more wealth in the States. And I think the West Coast, you have big shows. Then you have to almost move east to Mississippi towards New York, Pennsylvania to get other large shows where there's a lot of wealth around. You have large collections. And the other thing is just the importers of brass.
Your picture's breaking up, Larry.
Yeah, it does. I think my wires are going in the camera. That or I'm just half wired tonight. That's all.
Have another one.
Yeah. There, I don't want anybody to go into convulsions there watching that. So
Half of these guys have wires that are loose.
but
Like having a
again,
screw
with
loose.
the NMRA Nationals in the States, look at the trade show that's put on with all your large distributors like Walthers and importers and such, and even all your
but Larry,
manufacturers.
you bring up a very good point. So I'm going to two conventions this summer. I'm going to go to the NMRA convention and then to the narrow gauge convention. And I think, coming back, Steve, to your question, how do you prepare? They're very different in terms of, from the perspective of buying things, what you're preparing for. So I know the NMRA convention has a big thing called a National Train Show associated with it. And it's a very interesting event, but it is 70% huge vendors, big vendors.
Yes.
Bachman has a big booth. Atlas has a big booth. There will be a couple of hobby shops there with big booths of hobby shop stuff, which are going to be interesting. But beyond that, there's really are not a lot of small vendors there. And what there's not there are the 40 tables of stuff. And so what's interesting is it's kind of interesting is there are three, in my mind, there are three kind of events. So the NMRA, I really don't go there to buy stuff. I go there to check out what the vendors are doing, look around, see what's hot, go see Blue Nami announcements a year before ahead of time so you kind of know about it. And you really only go there, quite frankly, because you're at the convention. Would I go to the National Train Show as a national train show and get really excited about it? Other than meeting the vendors and that, the layouts are really good in that too, but it's not something where you're going to buy anything. So you have to go just to see things and talk to people. Then you kind of go to the narrow gauge convention, which is kind of an amalgamation of all three, right? Because you've got lots of clinics and that stuff, but then the trade show has both vendors and a lot of selling of things at tables that you can just see on the internet and you can't get any other way. So, those figures you wanted for a diorama. So that's kind of a different kind of, that becomes, I guess what I call is that's almost targeted completion of models. And then you go to a swap meet or something, and you don't go with nearly as much of a preordained agenda. You're just looking to buy what's very interesting and a great deal.
Exactly.
So to me, there's different kinds of events, and what you shop, how you shop is different for the event. Does that make sense?
I agree with a lot what you said. And from a Canadian perspective, now I switched from HO to ON3 about 35 years ago. And to walk into a shop, there was only one shop in this GTA area around here that had narrow gauge, and especially ON3, and they would trade, so I could trade my HO. But to buy kits and things that would never see in the shop, I had to go to shows in the States, especially the Mid-Atlantic narrow gauge show they used to put on. It was fantastic. And we had it was a module show, they said, but there was small vendors there, but and pills, but and even just like a swap meet, but I would find stuff there that I couldn't find up here. So that enticed us to go across the border. Once you started doing that, it just became a habit. You said, well, how do you prepare for one of those shows? You pack your suitcase and you empty your bank account.
I think that's the biggest thing you're saying there, Larry, is that a lot of people from the States will not travel to Canada to see a national unless we have something as big as they have. And that's very difficult for us.
Yes.
It just isn't there. And it's the same for us traveling down to the West Coast where Phil is and that. There's just no way I'm going to travel that far because it would break my bank account just to get there.
Well, that's it. There's the difference in the dollar, and then to
Yep.
go to the West Coast, you got to fly most times, and then travel insurance,
Exactly.
which given people my age now, and with various little problems in health, it's sometimes you can't get travel insurance, and so that restricts you from going, or you'd be silly to go
Exactly.
without it.
Yep.
So those things we don't consider, and
I can't get traveling insurance as much as I used to anymore now because of all the problems I've had.
right, yeah.
So
You
it
guys
kills
in
it.
Toronto, you guys in Toronto, do you ever come down? There's a big show in Syracuse in November, first weekend in November at the State Fairgrounds. I
Yes,
don't know if That's a little more, that's like
It's
a
closer.
4-hour, 5-hour drive for you guys. It's a 2-day show. There's another one a little later in Hamburg, over
yes.
the Buffalo area. I don't know if you ever get down to
I
those.
used to attend those, and there used to be a
They're,
narrow gauge group down that you'd see, but I think that group is broken up. I don't know if they're together. They had G scale too, or 120 scale. 120 wasn't that popular. Right? There was 123, or 25, and 122, I guess it was. And they were fantastic modelers. When I saw their stuff, I was just drooling at what they had on the display. And
The show in Syracuse has they have a mix of people with layout set up, people who are selling off their stock or whatever, and you do get some of the more national guys and none of the real big retailers, but some of the medium-sized ones will show up with the Micromark is almost always there. And what they've taken to doing is they'll take orders and bring stuff to the show for
yes,
you. If you want, want something, you can tell them, hey, I'll come in and I'll pick this up. I've been, that's right in my hometown. Our division has a table there. But when I go to a train show, I always go with a list. I don't always come back with the stuff that's on the list. Sometimes I come back with something that I discovered I didn't know I couldn't absolutely live without until I saw it on somebody's table. Lately, that's gotten to be Craftsman car kits. And I don't know if-
I have gone to a number of O-scale meets in Cleveland, Ohio.
Uh-huh.
They used to have them there pretty regular, and I haven't been there for the last few years. Of course, it's been pretty rough.
Yeah, well, yeah, you haven't been able to travel, I know. The big,
Yeah.
I went to the last NMRA convention in Toronto, and until this one that I'm going to in Texas, that was the last one I went to. And of course, they had the trouble with the SARS and everything, and
Oh,
it wasn't
yeah.
what it
Yeah.
was going to be. But we had a great time anyway. I got a ride on the trolley cars there, which I thought was really neat. The big show in the Northeast is in West Springfield, Massachusetts,
Yes.
in January, last weekend in January. They have 4 buildings at the Eastern States Exposition Hall. If you can't find what you're looking for there, it's because it isn't there. And they do get some of the bigger modelers or bigger people in. It's a 2-day
Yeah,
event.
That's
as
a great,
well.
I used to go to that show when I lived in Boston. That's a great show.
it
Yeah,
is.
it's a really good show. And I tend to, now because I'm involved with the NMRA, I tend to spend time at the table talking to people, but I do try and get around. What I try not to do is buy stuff that I know I can buy in my local hobby shop, because we feel
Yeah.
we're blessed to have him, and you don't want to put him out of business by buying something that somebody's discounted somewhere that he's got sitting on his shelves. So I usually go there first and look. If he doesn't have it, then maybe I'll see about hitting somebody at the other shows. But you never know what you'll find. Sometimes there's, you just turn up, like I said, something you didn't know you couldn't live without until you saw it.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, Steve, this has been a great discussion tonight. Maybe we ought to do this again next week, because I'm telling you, I think there's a lot of good information about this.
One more question. Where did the trolley guys go?
Oh, the trouble is they're all old. And, because,
We go
the last
to East
trolley-
Penn and
Right.
West Penn meets every other year.
Yeah,
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and those are the two biggest traction meets.
yeah.
I love.
Don't want to miss it.
If I've said if I have to downsize again, that's what I'm going to do, is build a trolley layout. Build a trolley layout, because you can do it in a small space, and I like urban scenery anyway.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep, that's a good item to work with.
But there's not. There's not. Again, nobody's making trolley stuff is the trouble. If you've got to, there's unless you can find old brass, there's not a lot, and none of the manufacturers are putting out anything much anymore. It's so you got to either scratch build it or hoping to find some brass.
Don't
Been
just
there, done that.
Yeah,
go to
I'm
shape,
still doing that. I love to travel.
go to Shapeways and see if they have printed out trolley
Yeah.
bodies that you can put on HO mechanisms or O mechanisms.
Because there are some people out there that are doing the whole trolley bodies in 3D, and
Yeah.
they're sale. I mean, and they're beautiful models. I mean, they just are absolutely great. All you got to do is put a mechenism under them and paint them.
That's the future of some of these specialty scales, and like ON30, Bachman's sort of, they're lost their drive to produce new locomotives, but there's a dearth. ON30 is going to supplement, or 3D printing is going to supplement a lot of this specialty modeling.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for a great discussion tonight.
Okay.
All
Next week.
right. Yes, sir.